In a second? No, okay. Welcome everybody to the Thursday, October 7th, 2021 meeting of the Humboldt County Planning Commission. And as usual, in accordance with Executive Order N-29-20, the Planning Commission meeting will be held virtually. Please go to the county website. You can find all the information you need to join us. And with that, I will call the meeting to order and ask you to join me in a salute to the flag, please.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, for one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think you were leading us tonight, Noah. I could hear you in the background. Thank you. And with that, Laura, would you do Commissioners present or roll call, please?
Alan Bongio.
Present.
Thomas Motor.
Here.
Noah Levy.
Here.
Mike Newman.
Present.
Peggy O'Neill.
Here.
Brian Mitchell. Melanie McGaver.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Looks like we have a quorum. Almost but one. Maybe Brian will join us soon. All right. Director, do we have some, well, I guess first we have a discussion of remote meetings, and then we'll have some modifications.
Correct.
Sorry for that.
The governor's order. Wow.
Viewers? Bear with us, we're trying to get rid of that back.
I don't know if you guys already called the roll, but the link I first used wasn't working, so I am on. Thank you.
I saw you come on right after we finished.
Try this again. So we have a situation where, as you know, we've been operating under an executive order that allowed certain deviations from the Brown Act. And that executive order has now expired. And under a different assembly bill that has been adopted, we're asking the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution identifying that the meeting will be held remotely using teleconference technology. And so there was a resolution attached to the agenda package that we are asking you to adopt that will allow continued meetings remotely. And this will be from October 7th through November 6th, 2021. And at that time, we'll be asking you to adopt a new resolution. I would ask if Natalie Duke, County Council, has anything to add to that.
No, thank you, Director Ford. You covered it.
I read that caption.
In a sense, we've been doing what we're doing. Every meeting we read, or I read that, executive order from the governor that we're conducting the meeting. The governor's executive order has expired. Oh, I can't. Okay, I'm sorry.
I was muted. The governor's order has expired. So.
Okay, so Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right. And do you have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? And then take a roll call vote.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Alan Bongio,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Melanie McGaver,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Mike Newman.
Okay, motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Then we'll move to item D, agenda modifications.
So there are a couple of things that I just want to point out. There's quite a stack of things. Some is for item G1, the Eel River Produce LLC comments from the public. There is also a supplemental for item number H10 and a supplemental for item number H12. And it has come to my attention that there is maybe some interest in relocating the discussion that's currently item I1 at the end of the agenda to bring that up closer to the top or beginning of the agenda. And I would recommend that if that's the desire of the commission, to move that up after continued public hearings. So that would be between item G and current item H. And that discussion would be held prior to consideration of new business.
And would we need to have a roll call vote on that?
I would make a motion and redo the agenda. Yes, please.
So let's go back. I asked the director if we could move this item up because I think it's going to generate some discussion, and I didn't want it to be at the end of the night when we probably wouldn't even get to it to begin with. If that is okay with the rest of the commission, would somebody like to make a motion to move that up? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'll make that motion to move it up in front of H1.
All right. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you, Noah. Any further discussion on it before we vote? Seeing none, Laura, a roll call vote, please.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Mike Newman,
Yes.
Melanie McGaver,
Yes.
Alan Bongio.
Yes. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Laura. All right. Next, that takes us to item number E, public comment. This is the time for anybody in the public who wishes to speak on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. So get over, and the first caller is Rich Tobin.
Good evening. Today I was driving down 255 and noticed some from Arcadia to Manila, where I live, and noticed new signs, 4 new signs between Arcadia and Manila. And I went back and looked at them. They're covered up so you can't see it. And it says 101 South Detour. And I was stunned. I can assume what's going on is it's because they're going to do something down by the Indianola cutoff, and the traffic has to go somewhere. I'm concerned. I would like to know who I can talk to that can tell me the plans. It's the way I read it is it will be just southbound traffic. Both lanes of Highway 101 South going down there, including all vehicles. And someone is going to die when they try to get on 255 from Bluefin, Pacific, Carlson, all the streets on there. I'm presenting this because I believe planning department. I'd like to know who to talk to. I know you can't tell me now.
I'll tell you right now. That's called Caltrans because
Thank you.
that's out of our jurisdiction. That's a Caltrans issue, not a County of Humboldt and Planning Commission issue. So hopefully they can give you some answers. I don't even know what's going on there, but I would call Caltrans. Thank you. Next caller is Public 7429.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. I was wondering if during your discussion you were going to welcome public input, or was that just going to be between the commissioners?
No, there will be public comment. It'll be just like any other item.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public that wishes to speak? All right, seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back. So get back to you. All right, that brings us to our consent agenda. And tonight we have 2 items on our consent agenda. We have 2 action summaries. Review and approval of the September 2nd, 2021 action summary and approval of the September 16th, 2021 action summary.
I will move approval of those. And I just wanted to note that I appreciate that they've added in these action summaries have added more specifics about the conditions that were added or changed. So thanks for listening to the public's request for that and for ours.
No, you stole my thunder to give them.
Well, yeah, anyway, thank you.
No. Do we have a second? Mike, go ahead.
I'll make the second, and then I wanted to make a comment or a question.
Go ahead. What's your question, Mike? Go ahead.
So my question was, in the packet, it had a little different action summary. It gave a little bit of detail about public comment and who was talking, as opposed to the second set of action summaries that we received. I was wondering why what the differences are, why it was decided to change a little bit there. Just
recording in progress.
Okay.
We are recording now, though. Yeah.
Director, do you want to take the question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So my apologies. When I reviewed the action summaries, I was looking at all the comments that said, so-and-so commented or was invited to speak, and felt like that added nothing to the understanding, that it was more important to understand the summary of what actually was decided. And so evidently I didn't make the change on both sets. I only made the change on one. My apologies.
Okay.
Director. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? All right. Seeing none, Laura, a roll call vote, please.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Mike Newman,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
Alan Bongio,
Yes.
and who am I leaving out? Brian Mitchell.
You there, Brian? Well, we had 6 yeses, and I don't know what happened to Brian, but we'll say that the motion carried. Thank you, Laura. All right, that brings us on to item G, continued public hearings, and these are the projects listed below are public hearing items that have been continued from a previous meeting. And with that, take a staff report.
Hey, Alan, you could hear
Yes.
me or not? Just
Yes,
abstain
I hear you.
those minutes.
What about the minutes?
I was abstaining from those minutes. I'm sure if you could hear.
Did not hear you abstain.
Okay.
So Laura, one. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, so the first item is, I apologize, the first item is Eagle River Produce LLC Special Permit and Zoning Clearance Certificates. And now I will take the staff report.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes, well, we see a tent.
The tent.
No. Night.
We see your screensaver.
Oh, we see your screensaver with a nice tent and a solar system there.
Okay.
There, now it's starting.
Oh, you see it now?
Yes.
You just need to put it to 1 to show, not the preview.
Sorry, not. I need to put it to 1. I'm not sure what you mean. You don't see it?
I see it with the previews.
All right. How do I get rid of those puppies?
Go to
So they're in the way?
Go to File.
Yeah, go to File and
Sorry. Go to Slideshow. I'm sorry. Go to Slideshow.
right there? No, right next to it.
Slideshow.
Middle of it, over to the right.
Yeah.
Keep going down.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah,
You good?
Looks good now.
good.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so this item came before the commission at the last meeting on September 16th. The commission held a public hearing, received testimony, and closed the public hearing, and a motion was made and seconded to make the required findings, approve the mitigated negative declaration, and approve the applications with a condition added that staff could conduct spot inspections of the farm at staff's discretion. On a vote of 2-2, the motion did not carry. The commission then passed another motion on a vote of 4-0 to continue the item to this evening so that additional commissioners will be present. So I will briefly run through that same staff report for the benefit of the commissioners who were not here. Maybe. Okay. The project, which is Eel River Produce, application 16417 for zoning clearance and 2 special permits, is in the Red Crest area, and more specifically in the Holmes Flat area of the Red Crest area on a 30.5 acre parcel on the south side of Holmes Flat Road. Presently on site are 3 approved RRRs for 60,000 square feet of full sun outdoor cannabis and a zoning clearance for 10,000 square feet of commercial nursery. The application before the commission this evening is to add a fourth RRR by zoning clearance to allow 20,000 square feet of outdoor light deprivation, a special permit to allow 33,200 square feet of outdoor light deprivation, and 10,000 square feet of mixed light. So the total proposed cultivation requested tonight is 63,200 square feet, or 1.45 acres. The total of the existing plus the proposed this evening would be 133,200 square feet, or 3.06 acres. And lastly, a special permit is requested to vary from the 600-foot setback from the Humboldt Redwood State Park. This is the site plan. North is to the right. As you can see, all of the existing and proposed facilities and grows would be at the north end of the site, approximately the one-third end of the site, furthest away from the state park, and also the southerly end of the site has habitat values that are being protected. The cultivation is almost entirely dry farmed. It is dry farming with supplemental water. When irrigated, the water will be sourced from rainwater catchment directly into tanks. Estimated water needs for the existing proposed farm is 161,000 gallons a year. Storage tanks is 170,000 gallons. And a condition of approval is recommended for a meter to be placed on the existing well to ensure that it is not used for cannabis irrigation. The special permit to reduce the setback is allowed by section 55464 of the CCLUO. A portion of the project site would be within 76 feet of the setback, or would encroach within it. So it would still be set back by 524 feet. State Park staff requested additional information, and the applicant prepared a new site plan based on a boundary survey prepared by a licensed surveyor that was provided to park staff, and no further comments were made by park staff. The applicant additionally offered to ensure that the 8 proposed greenhouses that would be within that 76 feet would be modified to ensure no noise impact. That is, the proposed snap fans, if they would rise above 3 decibels above ambient at that location, would not be used at all. So there'd be no fans. And that's now proposed as a condition of approval. A CEQA initial study mitigated negative declaration was prepared and circulated. There were 11 mitigation measures that relate to biological resources on site, protecting the wetlands, providing buffers, and also for cultural resources and paleontological resources. And these are all included in the recommended conditions of approval. Comments were received from 3 agencies and from a neighbor. Staff does not believe that the comments changed the conclusions of the mitigated negative declaration. Staff recommends that the commission consider the draft mitigated negative declaration, make the findings in support of the mitigated negative declaration, and adopt the mitigated negative declaration, and make the required findings in support of the special permits and the zoning clearance, and adopt the resolution for all of those, as well as the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and the condition recommended by the commission at the last meeting, if the commission so desires. that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff? We'll move up for public comment. Okay, seeing none, I will open this up.
Hold on.
Oh, sorry,
I couldn't get my hand up fast enough or unmuted.
Sorry.
Sorry, Chair. I have a question for staff regarding in the staff report under project history. There was the zoning administrator had directed staff to hold a public meeting of the Holmes Flat community and bring the project back to the Planning Commission then for a decision. Staff understands the applicant reached out to members of the community. However, the applicant stated to planning staff that they did not support having a public meeting with staff and the community as they felt it would not prove fruitful. For this reason, no public meeting was held. This was back in, brought back to the zoning administrator January 7th, 2021. My question is that part of the regular procedure that the applicant can choose not to have a public meeting with the neighbors?
Shall I take that, John? I can answer that.
Please go ahead.
Yeah. So it's not a requirement, Commissioner. It was recommended by the zoning administrator. The applicant said that they did have their own meeting, I believe a number of times, with especially with one particular neighbor who is opposed to the project. Following that, the applicant asked us to not do that meeting because they felt it would be fruitless, and that was it, that it would be fruitless to their effort. And we agreed to let this come ahead to the commission.
Was there any other public reach out before when this was first approved?
I'm sorry, approved? You mean the first zoning clearance?
Current permit that's already approved before everything was starting, when they were going through the permitting process. Were there any other public meetings put out to the neighborhood?
Yeah, I wasn't here for that, so I don't have that answer. John, do you know?
I do. When the nursery was approved, it was done at a zoning administrator hearing, and there was a lot of public comment on that at that time, and I believe we did have meetings with the neighbors.
So the general drift of that at that time was there was not a lot of opposition, or there was?
There is a lot of opposition.
From not just one neighbor or two?
There were several neighbors that I would characterize as being concerned about the project, yes.
Okay. That was my questions.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, I will open this up for public comment. And is there anybody who wishes to speak on this item? I see a lot of people, but I see no hands up. There is one hand up. 7108, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one clarifying question on the project description here. It says water storage totals 120,000 gallons with an additional 50,000 proposed. I thought I heard something about there was more there at this time. So wondering what the correct amount is. And if it's not what's on this, then I hope that that would be changed before it goes into the action summary. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other public that wishes to speak on this item? Go ahead. Hubner, I believe is the pronunciation. *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi there, commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I wanted to thank you for asking about the community. And yeah, this is the third meeting that we've had in the last year and a half. I am a direct neighbor to the property, and I'm also representing my other neighbor. I wanted to thank John Ford for noting that there has been some opposition from several, I'd say about 5 to 7 neighbors who are in opposition, just for basically our entire valley being completely changed. And the whole, the smell of everything, we get headaches all the time. Yeah, and the last time that we had a meeting, we agreed that it would be fruitless. Our other neighbors were not willing to join in the conversation this go around. I did send in a letter and a packet that I emailed to the commissioners, and I was hoping that you could at least tell me that you did receive that information. And I specifically am also seeking and hoping you can answer some questions just about our entire valley itself. And if you could help me find out how much our watershed is limited to, like what the percentage of grows is and how many, and how I can find that information out as well. So I wanted to thank you again for recognizing that our community has opposition, not only to this grow, but to our entire valley being changed. And yes, the last time we had a meeting in 2021, they reached out. It was a very uncomfortable meeting. My neighbor's wife was there, and not long after that, the owner of the property had approached them in a very angry manner, and there was an incident report filed with the sheriff's department. And after that, unfortunately, his wife suffered a miscarriage. So they are sitting out this round, and we are not comfortable anymore reaching out to them. So I was really hoping you can answer my questions about what the limit is in our area. And also, if you guys are going to be doing an in-depth study with the wells in the area, because we are concerned about our water quality. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this item? All right, with that, I'm going to close the public comment, and I'll let the director. Okay. Is the applicant with us, and would they like to speak?
Yes, this is Dustin Owens. I represent the applicant. I'd just like to speak briefly and comment to respond to the public meeting issue. We did, during the initial round of applications and approval of the RRR, have meetings with the neighbors. During those meetings, we offered to engage in whatever mitigation efforts to reduce the impacts on the neighbors that they would like. The neighbors made it very clear that they weren't interested in even having those discussions with us. And so even though they weren't interested in doing that, we went ahead and engaged in whatever mitigation efforts we could see to address the concerns that they did express. For example, we planted a number of trees. One of their concerns was looking at cannabis greenhouses out their windows. We moved the greenhouses so they'd be more difficult to see and adjusted our site plan. And in terms of having a negative interaction with the neighbors, as far as I'm aware, that's just not true. So.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to speak before I close this? Mary Schweikert, apologize.
Hello.
Yes, welcome.
Well, thank you. I am a therapist in this area, and I have been working with a number of clients who have lived here for many years and have done everything they could to follow all the rules in getting licensed. And now they're losing everything because of the drop in prices and the way that the state handled this allowance of how many people could get licenses down south, and there's all kinds of issues. But my question is, why are we allowing another huge grow in a community that already has people who are suffering and struggling and losing everything, who can't make it, who have been here for years and years working and doing what they've been asked to do? That's my question.
Thank you. Next one is Public 6392. Star 6, there you go.
Hi, good evening. My name is Amber. I do a lot of local compliance and metric work for the farmers. And I really believe that you should approve this project because these guys, they follow the rules. They're very good neighbors and they're local Humboldt boys. And that's what we want in this area. And there won't be any more impact to the area with this project other than what already exists. So it should definitely be approved. So I really appreciate the opportunity to comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, now I am going to close the public comment, and would the director like to answer those questions or staff?
Yeah, sure. We'd love to. So I heard the question about the water, and the staff report identified 120,000 gallons of existing and 50,000 gallons proposed. I think what Mr. Johnston mentioned was 170,000 gallons, and at least my math would say 120 plus 50,000 is 170,000. So I think that's consistent. I think in terms of the concern with limitations in the watershed, if the speaker who was identified as Hubner wants to contact the Planning and Building Department to come in and identify that they're from the Holmes Flat area, and we can look it up by watershed and identify the number of acres that are allowed and the number of permits that are allowed within that watershed. And we can also identify how many have been approved and how many acres have been approved. That can be pulled up in our GIS system. In terms of the wells in the area, I think the person was pretty well informed that we are undertaking a study of where wells have been drilled, beginning to develop a baseline understanding of wells and demand for wells and what the impact is so that we can do a more comprehensive study and develop well permitting requirements.
Thank you, Director. I think that answered all those questions. So with that, I'm going to bring it back to the Commission. And are there any thoughts on this one?
I was just any of the public testimony from last time. It doesn't get into word for word specific, but was any of it of a CEQA nature or raising issues that could call into question the validity of the CEQA work done on this project?
Somebody from staff.
I don't know, Mr. Johnson, if you have any different recollection, but I do not recall anything challenging the CEQA work.
I don't. I have just my handwritten notes, and I don't think there were any comments from the public that addressed CEQA. No.
All right. Thank you.
Melanie, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to comment to say that I appreciate that the sole source of water will be rainwater now. And I also I'm really happy to see the improvements of the project overall. And I'd be willing to make a motion, although I do think we want to discuss the setback.
There's a few more hands up still, so maybe we'll come back to you for that motion. How about comments?
So I apologize, I missed the last meeting, so I'm not all the way up to speed on this, but I have a couple questions for staff. I heard something about an ambient temperature or ambient noise. It can't be 3 decibels or over the ambient noise of the new, if approved. Is that before the current operation, or is this a piecemeal project where basically you put in noise and then you raise the ambient noise level and then you add in more noise? So I just want a clarification on that. And what is the current practice of watering right now? If I was reading through some of this history and there was something about them getting water from a source they weren't supposed to. So I'm using light deprivation techniques. I've seen some people dry farm and some people use more water. So those numbers are hard for me to wrap my head around at less than 2 gallons a square foot when I was reading other reports that weren't clear about them taking water. And just one other random thing is in my packet, it shows this whole parcel is technically zoned TPZ, but that's just what I'm reading in my packet. Maybe I'm misreading it.
All right.
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks, Commissioner. So the applicant's agent offered, when we weren't getting a response from the state park and the agent was concerned that they might be putting together something negative, and they never did respond. The agent offered that they would ensure that there would be no noise greater than 3 decibels above ambient within that 76-foot area. And so I said, okay, then I'll make that a condition of approval now. And they said, okay. So they'll have to take readings after fans are put in, and there'll be snap fans, so they're quieter. And if they exceed 3 decibels above ambient, they're going to take them out. And they understand that that's an expense, but that's what they offered, and it's a condition. The water source, I'm not familiar with the history of them having used groundwater. I think that's what you said. But that was something that was raised by a commenter at the last hearing, and that's why there's a condition that that would not be allowed by basically slapping a meter on that at their expense. That will be monitored, and if there's a volume taken out that exceeds what's domestic, then that's going to be a violation. And no, nothing on the footprint of the site is within the TPC. I don't recall if the southerly area might be. There is some forest on the southerly area, but not where the facility is.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Try to restate my questions. What's the definition of ambient noise? Is that pre any cultivation on this site, or is that I built half a project, raised the noise level, and now I can make a new baseline ambient noise? Current water use, does staff have any records of what current annual water use is? Because as stated, I'm kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around 2 gallons a square foot. Unless I misread some other stuff about them using water they weren't supposed to use, if it's being dry farmed.
Okay, so I understand ambient to mean that existing conditions right now, that whatever's on site is part of the existing environment. So, if they've increased noise, I don't know what that is, but yeah, that's ambient now. As far as the water source, John, I'm not familiar with the background on that.
There have been complaints that they were using unauthorized water sources. We have investigated that, and it's my recollection we have never actually verified the complaints to be true.
Does that answer your questions, Thomas? All right. Melanie, I see you have your hand up. That may have been.
No, it's just still up.
Okay. Seeing no others, I have a couple questions. One of them was that this was asking for a fourth RRR, and if my recollection is right, we only allowed 3 RRRs on any one parcel. So am I remembering that right?
Perhaps what you're recalling is that we initially adopted a policy, and that ordinance was just adopted by the Board of Supervisors that identified that anything over 2 RRRs would require a discretionary permit, thus the rationale for the special permit in this particular case.
I don't know why I had that in my head. And then my other question was, it said in the staff report that it was part of the Avenue community plan. And I assume that meant Avenue of the Giants community plan. It was just the Giants was left out. But my question would be, did it say anything about in the community plan about these specific areas, you know, Homes Flat being the one here, but is there anything specific in that area plan regarding cannabis?
There's nothing specific in the community plan regarding cannabis. You'll recall that the CCLUO did identify special requirements for certain community plan areas. The Avenue of the Giants was not a community plan area that is regulated by the CCLUO with special provisions.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Mike Newman, I just saw your hand come up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Question that came up to me that was in the back of my mind that you brought up again to help me remember part of my question was about the fourth RRR. And it is completely discretionary. Is that what I heard?
That is absolutely what you heard.
So this extra one that is on for approval is discretionary totally.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any other questions? All right. Well, Melanie, you had made the offer earlier to make the motion on this one.
Did we want to discuss the setback?
Feel free.
Well, my feeling with the setback is that there'll be more disturbance to the site if they're moved. But you know, everything's a trade-off, so there are benefits and disadvantages to both.
So with that, would you like to make a motion or?
I guess nobody has anything to say on that, so.
No, I don't think anybody else. Mike Newman has his hand up, so we'll see. Maybe he has a comment. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Chair. One other thing that I haven't heard much in discussion that we were discussing at the last meeting more was about the prior, I wouldn't say indiscretions, but non-directives that were brought forth by the planning department and the neighborhood, not in compliance with different things, and it was difficult, and that was part of the motion at the last meeting was about the spot inspections. So can we hear a little bit more about that sort of information for the commissioners that were not present?
Good point. Thank you.
Hey, Des, you want to address that?
John, I don't have that background.
So there have been a history of complaints on the site, and the public comment was that one of the things ordinance requires is that before we can do this, county staff can do an inspection, that we need to give 24 hours notice. And the comment was made that by giving 24 hours notice, it gives people time to get their stuff together, hide all the violations, put things away, whatever the issue is. And so the condition was added to require that spot inspections be allowed, that if staff wanted to come and pop onto the site at any time without advance notice, that was possible, that they're able to do that, so that would preclude the operator from being able to clean things up if there was a complaint and there was something ongoing, that we wouldn't have to call request an inspection, that we could just go out and inspect.
Thank you, Director. No, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, I didn't have much to add, but I just wanted to chime in. Mike did already make the point that I was going to make about asking him a little bit more about the background of complaints and compliance. But what I wanted to say is that I do think that it's fair to say that all or most of the impacts that this property has and this project has would have are already taking place. I think it does make a certain amount of sense to add. I mean, we're having a public hearing about it, but I think that you could basically do what they're wanting to do with very little impact relative to most projects of that scale. I do think that the mostly dry farming and low water use is part of, and the reliance entirely on rainwater catchment, along with the reliance on PG&E power, makes me feel that I could support this, even though I have some concerns given the neighborhood objections to it. But that's what I got.
Thank you. I'll make one last comment. I thought it was, this is really kind of off the point, but I thought it was kind of funny, the name of their LLC is Eel River Produce. It's kind of ironic that this is where all the produce in this county used to be grown, and now hardly any produce produced here. And we're growing marijuana now, so maybe the name needs to be changed to something. It seems like that's what would you say? No honesty in advertising or something. I'm not sure what the term is. So I apologize for that little comment, but it was kind of made me laugh when I saw it. All right. Mike, your hand is still up, or did you put it back up? Nope. Okay.
I put it back up.
Oh, good.
So concerning this last RRR that's discretionary, would you reiterate, would staff reiterate exactly what that does for this site? What is that RRR exactly, and how does it affect this permitting and site?
So basically the fourth RRR is for 20,000 square feet. The discretion of the commission is to approve or deny that. What the commission chooses to do or not, let me rephrase this. If the commission chooses to not approve that RRR, that does not affect the existing approvals on the site.
So is that strictly outdoor, or is it indoor where there is odor control?
There is not odor control associated with this.
It is strictly outside.
It is outside, yes. It may be within a greenhouse, but it's not in an enclosed greenhouse.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, Melanie, I guess it's your big chance right now.
All right. Okay, so I guess for the setback issue, we'll just go with that would entail moving them, which would be introducing probably further effects than what is there already. So we will go ahead and find that the commission has, for the Eel River Produce LLC project, record number PLN 2020-16417, APN 209-331-002, has considered the MND and made the findings to support the MND, adopt the MND, make all of the required findings for approval of the special permits and zoning clearance certificate, and approve the Eel River Produce special permit, zoning clearance certificate, and mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program as recommended by staff and subject to the recommended conditions.
Melanie, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Thomas and Mike. So Thomas first.
Mr. Chair, did you want to add that other condition that was discussed last time for spot inspections?
I'll ask Melanie, did you want that as part of your motion?
I think we did agree last time that given the history, it wouldn't be a bad idea. So yes, well, we can add that condition.
I would support adding that.
All right. Thank you. Thomas Mulder, you have your hand up.
So I really want to support this, but I still haven't heard my answers to my questions. And I'm just really concerned about piecemealing projects, especially when it comes to that noise. You know, you do 10,000 square feet and then you slowly make a neighborhood way noisier than it used to be, and you get above that original 3 decibel ambient. So I have concerns there, and then also concerns about the 2 gallons a square foot in regards to light deprivation. I'm still having concerns wrapping my head around that. So unfortunately, unless I really get a clear answer, I can't support it.
Sorry, I don't mean to jump in, Mr. Chairman, but I do see that the applicant's agent is there with his hand raised, and I wonder if we might make an exception and let him answer the questions that Thomas has.
Yes, I will today after all the commissioners' questions are. I'll let you on for a short time. I usually don't do this. So, Mike had another question, and then we'll let Dustin.
Thank you, Chair. I have reservations about the outdoor grow and the odor, more odor in that area there with the neighborhood and that. I think I would not support it with the new RRR going into place for the outdoor without the odor control. So I would be voting no at this present point as things stand.
Right. No, is your hand still up, or do you have another question?
Yeah, no, sorry, that was up from before. Yep.
All right, Dustin, we'll let you respond. Please.
Thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to provide some actual clear answers to Commissioner Mulder. So in terms of the ambient noise, a test was performed when no cultivation was going on and set the ambient noise level at 40 decibels. And so we're capped at going up to 43 decibels with the cultivation occurring. So that was already established. I do believe it's referenced somewhere in the staff report, but I don't remember exactly where. Regarding the water use, we have been using just the rain catchment to supplement the dry farming this year, and through the end of the July 8th, 2021, which was the end of our first cycle, we had used 23,600 gallons for the 60,000 square feet of existing cultivation. And those numbers are in line with what we estimated for the full build out. And I believe we did provide records of that usage to the county, although I didn't see it in the staff report. In terms of the RRR, we have no problems if that comes off, if it facilitates the approval of the project. That's, if that's necessary, that's fine. And we're also fine with the spot inspection conditions. We have no problem with that. I would say that the alleged violations that were brought up by the neighbors previously were actually unconfirmed and unfounded. So, if spot inspections are needed, that's fine with us.
Thank you. Melanie, I see your hand back.
Yes, I just wanted to add something that might be helpful for Commissioner Newman. If you look up Eel River produce, you'll see that there are about 4 other farms, one of them quite large, New Moon Organics, all directly adjacent to this one. So might be just the smell of the new produce countryside.
All right, so we have a motion and we had a second to that motion. Is there any further discussion on it? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Melanie McGaver,
Yes.
Alan Bongio,
No.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Thomas Smolder.
I'm gonna go yes, providing staff can justify what was presented by the applicant's agent.
Noah Levy,
I'll be a yes.
Mike Newman,
No.
Peggy O'Neill,
No.
Thank you, Laura. The motion carries yes, 4-3. Thank you, everybody. That's a long one. 7 o'clock, and we usually take a break around this time. So let's take 5 minutes, and then we will come back and we will have a discussion. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. So, as you could see on our agenda, after last meeting and before this one, I asked the director to give us some time to discuss subjects surrounding cannabis. Part of that was on my own. Yes, I just wanted to start having the discussion on some items, and also Commissioner McCaver had asked me to agendize to discuss some of the same issues. So it seemed like the appropriate time. Once I'd had another commissioner, it was asked me, and it was what I was thinking anyhow to a certain extent. So I asked the director to agendize some time, and I forget exactly how he put it down, and he definitely hit the high points of the things that I had discussed with him. That we were going to talk about water use and CEQA potential for the changed circumstances that we've seen, electricity, and there's a number of other issues that are on the list. Basically, my thought process on this was that we've been doing this experiment of cannabis in Humboldt County for approximately 6 years. And in those 6 years, a lot of things have changed. The ordinance has changed in that 6 years. And a lot of the issues that surround these areas where we're permitting these have changed. And I don't see it getting any simpler. I see it only getting more complex. There's projects coming up that there is a lot of issues surrounding them and people are upset about them. And I'm thinking that possibly it's time that we take some time and have a discussion of what the issues are and maybe make some recommendations that we send on to the supervisors to possibly make some changes to the cannabis ordinances. We don't have that power to make changes, but we can definitely make recommendations to the supervisors. So this is basically our chance to have some discussion and about those items, and we will also, after we have some discussion, allow the public to have some discussion, and maybe we'll make some recommendations to the supervisors. So with that, since I thought it'd only be right to let Melanie start us off, since she is the one that got this ball rolling. If you'd like to bring up the thoughts you had, Melanie, that would be great. I don't hate to put you on the spot like that, but
okay,
you can start off. Right. And I got 3 pages of thoughts, so go ahead.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Chair. So yes, in the past we've, well, I have anyway, asked for maps to be produced that show all of the permits that have been permitted, but also the ones that are outstanding, just so we can get an idea of the effects associated with those at a more landscape level. We're still waiting for those maps to come out. And I'd also like to have planning, or maybe we can directly ask the supervisors to look at having some sort of biodiversity corridor or environmental corridor that runs north-south. So it's something I brought up quite a long time ago, maybe a year or 2 ago. But with the climate changes that we're experiencing, species will have to migrate, excuse me, and the directionality will be north. So what we see in other places is that if it all gets chopped up, some of the less vaginal species are not able to move. Fortunately, unlike Europe, our mountains run north-south, so that's not an issue, but there needs to be continuity. And the really great thing about having such a corridor would be that it really makes it easier to plan. So if we have such a corridor, for example, we don't need to worry so much about all of those things for every single project, because it gives us kind of a backup, a safeguard. So in fact, it makes it easier to permit projects if you have really clear boundaries and responsible plans to work with from the beginning. So I'd really like to see some discussion of that at the planning and maybe supervisor level. And then finally, I did have some concerns recently, given that the environment has changed, of course, as it does, but there have been some, greater changes, let's say, in the last couple of years. And part of the process that we undertake as planning commissioners is to adopt the already completed MND or EIR. And part of that adoption process, means that we have to look at those and adopt those documents to, make our findings for any particular project. And in the CEQA, it's quite clear that that is a little bit more difficult to do if the environment itself has changed significantly in any way. It makes it difficult to adopt a document that was done for an environment that may or may not be the same now. So I would like planning staff to look into that as well. Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you, Melanie. The director would like to respond to right now.
Yeah, I thank you. The commission does not re-adopt an environmental document every time an action is taken relying upon a previously adopted document or previously certified document. The requirement is to consider. And in terms of changed circumstances, I would point out that drought is addressed in both ordinances, specifically addressed in the EIR, contemplated in the mitigated negative declaration. Those are not new or changed circumstances.
Right. Yes, I understand all of those things. But it might be nice to have a look at the specific drought conditions, perhaps that were in place when those documents were completed, and see, I mean, that may not pass a threshold of significance in terms of a so-called significant change in the last couple of years, but I'd feel comfortable if it were checked.
Thank you, Melanie. Does anybody else have any thoughts on anything? Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
Just trying to get my video started and my unmuting done. Just takes a little bit. So I agree about the maps of proposed and pre-existing. I think it'll be helpful. That was discussed about 1.5 years ago. If I recall, that was before COVID when we were in the Board of Supervisors chambers. And I thought that was prevalent thought. It would be good to consider and see for each of these projects to be considered, to see the maps and see what has already been approved and what's around the project that's at hand, and then what is proposed, because that does take everything in consideration. And talking about proposed consideration, I've seen, the thought about a moratorium be placed on new stuff, any new permitting coming in, and leave it at the existing stock that we have at this point to get through that, given the drought conditions that we're going through at this point. It would be a good stoppage or a good break point to take a look at that at this point, in my mind, and very prudent to not go forward with brand new permitting in cannabis for any permits that way. Electricity, I'm all for as much as we can getting off the generators, but of course we're trying to bring people into legal compliance that were on the dark side and going to the light now, so that they undergo more scrutiny as businesses that are legit, that are out in the light, go through all the business costs and everything else that entails from that being lawful as opposed to being unlawful. And I'd like to see more I would say more pressure put on the illegal grows and get those busted up as quickly as possible would be a recommendation to the supervisors. So those are my thoughts at this point.
Thank you, Mike. Usually I let all the other commissioners chime in, but I have my hand up and then a couple came up behind. I got my thoughts in order, so I'm gonna go ahead and then Peggy will be after me. Had a lot of time to think about this, probably more than most of you, to really put things down on paper and such. And everybody's touching on the same things. I mean, we've got cumulative impacts that are starting to show up. Roads and traffic, water and wells, generators, and the PG&E question. And now we're finding out that we have the new issue with PG&E, that PG&E is saying that they may not have capacity in areas. So we're conditioning projects that they have to within, and I think our standard has probably been 2 years, have to get on PG&E. Well, if PG&E can't provide the service that these people need, can we be requiring that? Or are we going to say, okay, if you can't do that, then you have to have, solar to run the whole thing, or, some other form of power? I don't know. And another issue that comes up is setbacks to state parks more often is what it comes down to, or to federal lands, and then the trafficking across roads that are on those lands that serve these parcels. I think there's a lot of issues, and I'm just hitting on the big issues, but each one of these has issues within it. But I think that we're getting to the point where we really should at least ask the supervisors whether it's to put a pause on things, like as Mike was saying, some kind of a moratorium. I'm not necessarily wanting to see that, but that might be what has to happen. Or maybe in areas where the impacts have gotten so large that it's impacting those communities. I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been getting my ear full as of the last couple months as to why we're permitting all this. So it got me asking the question too, to myself. And there's some real controversial ones coming up. So I think it's going to get even more interesting. I think that personally that it's time that we ask the supervisors to take these things into consideration and look at the ordinance and see if there's maybe some tweaks to it that need to take place, maybe reevaluating some things, looking at the changes and how they may have affected the CEQA documents. Because I definitely think that there's been changes. I think when it comes to cannabis, we always try to come up with ways to make the project work. And I like that the county is trying to do something. I really do commend them for doing that. I just wish that we did that as strongly across the board in all areas, but we're just talking about cannabis here. But I think that some of the things we're doing to accommodate the cannabis industry is damaging the rest of the people in the county. It's damaging neighborhoods, it's damaging roads, it's damaging, what has been Humboldt County, and cannabis has been part of Humboldt County too. So I understand that that's part of it, but I just think that we're, and I called it an experiment, but really it is an experiment that we've been doing. This is new ground. We've been doing it for 6 years, and I may be the only one that was here when we passed the ordinance. I think Noah may have been there. He was right about the time. So, a lot has changed in that time. And yeah, we are in a drought year, and yes, we could have a wet winter, and we won't even be having this discussion next year. I don't know, but something's changed, and all you have to do is look at our watersheds, and you can tell they've changed. And I'm out there a lot. That's where I spend my free time, is on the rivers, and it's changed. So with that, my 3 minutes are up. Peggy, it's your turn.
My concern is about water, and I've never on this board heard so many successful wells being drilled and used, and I haven't had that experience. So I'm really concerned about, I encourage the water catchment, but I think that we need to be doing some real-time studies of the water catchment. And like you said, if it's a great winter, lots of rain, there's nothing to be concerned about. But I don't think that we should be barreling towards a disaster. And then we always get this, if you don't do this, then, the whole world's going to end and the industry is going to collapse. And I'd like to see people be successful that are already in the business and not just drive them into the ground, or get to the point where there isn't enough water catchment and people are going to turn around. the people are going to turn around and, you know, need alternative sources of water. And it's going to be, you know, imminent that if they don't get it right now, then, you know, the whole season will be ruined. So I think we should be doing some ongoing monitoring, and you can't do it on everyone, but maybe you could select a few that you can monitor to see if their water catchment levels are sure where they should be. And if not, you know, some advanced planning on where we're going to go with this. And, you know, I don't know if you've caught on, but it always matters to me what the community thinks. You know, I don't think that we should be changing, you know, the world. And, you know, you buy a home and you have a family and, you know, you want to make a living, and maybe that living is cannabis, but I don't think you should be able to destroy the whole neighborhood and turn everybody's world upside down for cannabis. Cannabis could fail like logging did. I watched the logging industry go under very quickly. And then what? You know, so there's not a lot of provisions for people to clean up their areas as they leave or to abandon them. And so I think we should always listen to the community, because that's who we represent. And if, you know, we're going to just approve everything that gets in front of us, you don't need us. You could just have the staff approve it. So that's my concern, is that the water usage, I don't always trust the numbers I see, or these great wells that are producing, but there's nothing to really back that up other than someone's word. And so that's why I take a look at each one of them. And if I don't feel good about it, or if there's a lot of community concern, then I don't want to move forward.
I agree. Thank you, Rose. So next is Thomas.
Okay, so this one's a tough one for me, and I have so many thoughts. I'll probably have to ask to talk a couple of times, and I apologize. This process, whatever we do going forward, I just want to clarify, like, I think what we do, and I just need to clarify, we request the Board of Supervisors, hey, we'd like to look at something, and then they send it back to us, and then we would hold hearings if there was any amendments to the ordinance. Is that correct or incorrect?
You want to answer that?
So yeah, if the board directed that there be modifications made to the ordinance, those changes would need to be considered by the Planning Commission first, and the Planning Commission would need to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors before they could be adopted.
Okay, the reason I asked is public notice. I know there's so many people in the community that are just holding on and, you know, on by a shoestring trying to make it through. And I don't want to even have a single conversation that takes place here and make some of those legacy operators that are really pillars of our community pulled up and go away. I think the last thing we want to do, I mean, in my mind, I believe, is just have a bunch of, you know, corporate takeover of our community and our county. And maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm out of line to say that, but I want to be cautious when we talk about those kind of things. For me, the water use issue was always taken care of. I haven't had the energy to go back and look at the hearings of the ordinance 2.0, but everything I have in my notes is in the development ordinance 2.0. All new cultivation was supposed to forbear regardless of water source. If that was in place, most of the community concern would be, I wouldn't say most, a lot of the community concern around water would be mitigated. I have a real problem with generator use going after that. I think the county should really look at differentiating, if there is even a talk about it, the difference between mixed light 2 and mixed light 1 generator use or sun-grown generator use. Those cultivators need to be able to run that generator to dry their product on the farm. Processors, everyone down the line, the longer the product can stay on the farm and you can get that value added, produced on the farm, processed on the farm, quality control, the more likelihood of these legacy cultivators are going to stay alive and be able to be pillars of the community. And the other thing, when we're talking about water usage and water storage, what's sufficient? What's, is it 25% of water use? Is it 50% of, annual water use, 75%? I'd like to have different parameters there. I have a couple more things, but I got to gather my thoughts.
Thank you, Thomas. Noah, you have your hand up, and then Mike.
Okay, thanks. Well, yeah, I'll say a couple things now. I'll probably hold off though and wait. I'd like to hear more from what the public may say when we get to the public discussion of this. But I just want to say I do appreciate, thank you, Alan, thank you, Melanie, for putting this on the agenda. I would wish that next time we might have been able to give the public a little bit more notice that we were going to have this discussion. And maybe that's a further discussion that we can have of this topic. But I do think that that there's changes that put it this way, what I would really like to have associated with this discussion is some sort of a staff report that might explore some options that are more clearly laid out for us to consider choosing. I mean, and that's maybe going to come out of, or maybe that can come out of the more free-form discussion that we're having of it tonight. I think we know we have a lot of consistency, a lot of agreement on what the key areas of concern are. So, you know, I'll just say, for my part, I would be supportive. There's been a discussion of having a moratorium on new projects, and you know, I would certainly be supportive of that myself. I think that's something that I heard in your remarks, Chairman Baggio, that you know what I'm concerned about doing though is putting a halt to the processing of the existing queue of projects that are already in the works. And I think that's where it gets a little bit trickier, because some of those have been in the works for literally 4 or 5 years, just trying to get something completed, or they're an interim permit that's been operating as an interim for that long. And so we're really just trying to allow them to complete their paperwork. So I think I want to distinguish between the ones that are already in the works and the new ones that might be proposed. I also, just because I don't want to forget to mention it, I'm intrigued by Melanie's suggestion of a conservation corridor. And I just wanted to ask if you could clarify a little bit more when we get back to you. If what you meant was a corridor of properties of north-south corridor, or corridors within which we would say we're not going to permit any cannabis projects. That was the idea. We would have a sort of a corridor. Okay, thanks. Well, I'll end my comments there for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Noah. Mike Newman, you have your hand up.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, one thing that I forgot to add that I wanted to bring up as a discussion point is POP inspections being available for the Planning Commission or Planning Department at any time, not having to give that notice. That I'd like to discuss that a little bit more in depth there, so that POP inspections can happen to put a level more in the public for trust and confidence in compliance being done on permitted grows and anything cannabis. So I'd like to put that forth as well. So that'll be it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, is there any more thoughts from the Planning Commission before I open it up for some public comment? Because I'm not seeing
I would just.
I haven't gone yet, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead, Brian, and then we'll come back to you. You can wrap it up. Go ahead, Brian.
I just wanted to state that back when we did Ordinance 2.0, we had a real vigorous discussion about segmenting or separating out the county by watershed and looking at carrying capacity by watershed. I know at that time, the Board of Supervisors, as it was then comprised, chose not to go that route. But given A, the change in circumstances, and B, the change in the Board of Supervisors, I would really be interested in having that discussion on a watershed by watershed basis, what can each one carry, and potentially even match up our enforcement efforts in those that are already well overutilized. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Melanie, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add a little bit. So yeah, I think it has been almost 2 years since I first requested the maps of the existing and proposed projects. And without those, it is very difficult to evaluate the environmental setting. And the environmental settings are different. And so, for example, maybe once we have the maps, we could look at things like the Biodiversity Corridor. We could look at things like maybe some areas might have a longer forbearance. Some might have a shorter forbearance. I mean, the idea that we have one forbearance period for every single place in Humboldt County is kind of crazy. There's different carrying capacities and so on and so forth. So there are ways I think that we could alter it for the better if we did have those maps, like, by being fair. So altering the forbearance is a little bit more fair rather than cutting out people who are in the permit process now. Maybe adding a little bit more to catchment. That's all.
Thomas, I see you have your hand up. And go ahead, Thomas.
Hello. So the discussion of POP inspections, I think that's kind of far outside of those three bullet points, but I'm just going to comment. I'm just going to say, hypothetically, there's still operators out there that haven't come in yet. And we start talking about that. We don't trust the cannabis industry at all. We're going to scare everyone. We're just going to be firing up 50, 125 kW generators out in the hills if we keep talking that way. And I have a serious problem with that. Since POP inspections was brought up, that was a hinging point for me on that previous agenda item to say community concern. How can that be mitigated with past potential bad history? Well, the POP inspection is there. Maybe, something where they're kind of out of line and we need to get them back in line. But legacy cultivators, they got kids, they go to school, they volunteer at community things. Like, I want to get so far away from that discussion, it's not even funny. That's it for now.
Thank you, Thomas. All right, seeing no other hands up, I am going to open this up for public comment, and then we'll bring it back and we'll have a little more discussion. Maybe the director, I'm sure he has some thoughts on this and where we could go with it. So now I'm going to open this up to public, and our first caller is 9831, please. Star 6. There you go.
Hello, good evening. I'm surprised to be first in line. This is Holly. I'm calling from Bryceland, and I'm appreciating the conversation about overall carrying capacity, what got brought up about PG&E, other outside of cannabis, inside the world and inside our community concerns and impacts. And I'm wondering if the commission is aware, if the commission's aware of the planning department's work on a climate plan for the county, and maybe asking for cannabis to just be included in that and have that report bumped up rather than, put off, like let that work happen and let that work inform some of the next steps. So I just wanted to bring that up. I've been interested in it for several years. It's been kind of coming. So I would love to see that followed through in an overall sense for our community. And I think that could address some of these questions. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Next caller is 7429.
Hi, good evening. This is Roby Tenorio. I really, really appreciate the commissioners taking the time to have this very serious discussion. The public is often told that the ordinance and the permitting process has and will decrease the negative impacts that we have in our neighborhoods and on the wildlife. And the water and our roads, all of the impacts. It's been that if, we have the legal system, it'll be better. But I think that really has to be looked at in the sense that now you may have less individual legal grows, but those grows are all much bigger, because there is this fallacy about what was truly existing. So applicants have had to inflate that to deal with the process. So they're bigger, and there's more than one harvest, often many harvests. So that's an issue right there. Also, another dynamic is that a lot of the bigger farms have a lot of employees, and so that's a big impact on the roads and the neighborhoods. I'd like to recommend that you ask CDFW to do a presentation for you, because they did create some aerial maps for the county of Mendocino. They did a presentation for them with aerial maps that showed what it looked like on the ground in 2010 and in 2020. And that way they had all these different overlays where you could see what it looked like just physically, the different hoop houses, and then impacts on the watersheds and the wildlife. So they did quite a thorough recommendation, and maybe you would get more information from CDFW if you requested that. I think that the way we're going isn't sustainable for the farmers financially, and certainly we're concerned about the environment. And I want to thank Commissioner Mulder for bringing up the cumulative impacts concerning the noise. I think that hasn't really been looked at that way, is when you move in and you have a bigger farm with 20,000 square feet, and you have your fans and things going, and then you add another, and then it's, where is that noise level being cited from, or judged from? Okay, well, anyway, I thank you very much for the discussion, and appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller is Karina Mata.
Hi, this is Patricia Lai. I'm with Karina Mata. I'm her consultant, and she is item number 7 on the agenda today, which is why I'm attending this meeting. I just wanted to comment on some of the suggestions and taking in mind carrying capacity and cumulative impacts and all those things. And I think they're good. I just want to reiterate the need for data and long-term data sets, and that, we've had half a decade of legalization, and what cumulative real-time data sets do we actually have? What type of analysis have actually been conducted? And how can we all engage and to come up with some real number crunching to better inform this policy? Regarding the map, I only have Melanie and Noah's email. I will also email it to the planning clerk. I had a map created in December 2017 of all planning permit applications on GIS, a web browser, that would be easily updated with today's data within an hour. And that is fully available for use to do for these planning purposes and analysis. Again, without any real baseline data, we can't make informed decisions. I urge you to think about, when we hear about, when I'm hearing in comments about roads and whatnot, I'm thinking about being in Swains Flat in March in 2017 versus being at Swains Flat store in March of 2021. And from what I see out in the field, there's a lot less cars. So, that's just one example. That's not corroborative evidence, but I want the best for the earth, and I want to offer that insight. I think I would encourage, everyone to come together, and we need some real data and figure this out in a cohesive plan. Because I think ultimately, whatever side people are with, we want the best for the longevity of our environment and our community. And to the surprise inspections, I will reiterate Thomas Mulder and piggyback on that sentiment. You know, Cal Cannabis is doing surprise inspections. I understand that the county may do so. Please let everyone know before you start moving forward with that effort. There's a huge mental and emotional trauma, and just, I don't even know how to explain of what happens when these type of surprise inspections happen for legacy farmers. And it's hard to explain for people who are inside of the bureaucracy and not on the outside, but those effects, like the mental and emotional and traumatic PTSD effects, are real. And I can encourage you to consider that in moving forward with such efforts.
Thank you. Thank you. Next caller is Madeline DeLapp.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this issue tonight. It is a little challenging since there isn't a staff report, so we're kind of giving comments a bit on the fly. I do want to start with, I did a recent Public Record Act request with the county planning department because the question of how many 2.0 projects that are new are in the queue was an unknown. And that PRA resulted in, it said that there are 187 projects in the queue. I did the math on that and it was added up to a total of about 45 acres. I also checked and 2/3 of those projects were applied for before 2020 and 1/3 of them came in between 2020 and 2021. In total, there are about 900 provisionally licensed or fully licensed cannabis cultivation projects in Humboldt County that totals 435 acres. So I know when we have planning commission after commission for years on end, it just seems like it's this massive amount of projects, but really what we're dealing with is 30 years of backlog permitting. And through the development of the two state laws, MMRSA, MCRSA, and then Prop 64, drought's not new. We have some of the strongest water protections for cannabis. Well, we have the strongest water protections in any agricultural process. That being said, wells were incentivized because they were perceived to be non-jurisdictional if they were not hydrologically connected. And there have been issues that have come up related to wells and springs going dry. And to the best of my understanding, that the county's drought task force and the planning and building department is coming up with short, medium, and long-term data-driven drought analyses that can really start to change what this kind of conversation is. I would ask that if there's a conversation around moratorium, we're not talking about anybody that's currently in the queue. That if you were to talk about it, it's about stuff in the future after a date. And just last things about use of water. There is new data around how much water is used by the cannabis industry. In Humboldt County, it is estimated 884 acre feet of water is used, which totals 288 million gallons. And for perspective, the lower Eel River Basin uses 13,600 acre feet of water. So it's using 13 times more water in the lower Eel River Valley than the entire cannabis industry in Humboldt County.
8 seconds.
And I will wrap it up with that. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Madam. Next caller is Public 2223. Are you there?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Good evening. This is Craig Johnson, owner and operator of Alpenglow Farms. I really appreciate going over some of these points. I really wish we had more time and a little more foresight to prepare some of our perspectives. I'm more so going to speak to how we're operating and some of my vision for the cannabis, and also speak to a couple of the comments I heard. One is the 24-hour inspection. I really think that is a good penalty tool or something like that after the fact. If someone has had extreme violations, so forth. I could see that being a good tool. But I myself had a 14-hour inspection last Thursday, and I had to cancel a pickup to a distribution company at this time of year, and that is hurting me monetarily. So I think we really got to be sensitive to some of these things that seem so easy that are not. The other is, I know 2,000 square foot farms are kind of a shoe-in, or known as, like cottage. I really feel we're a 10,000 square foot farm, and I can't really see anything smaller functioning. I really think we need to make accommodations to bring up the farms to 10,000 square feet and let them move in easily, especially if they're sun-grown only. I think one of the spaces where you could pull some enforcement and pull some easy money for the county, which would really not shine so much light on the cannabis business and cannabis cultivation, is to actually enforce night sky, and do that in a form that is possibly like, if the operator is X amount square feet, that's how exponentially more their fine would be. And for legacy operators, that's a really easy fix to cover a tarp. That's not really asking a lot for someone to invest a lot of time and energy to correct that action. So I would be for more enforcement in that. When it comes to generators, yes, I agree with Thomas. It's very important for us to be able to declare a state grown, I call it, permaculture, no-till, living soils, sequestering carbon, but we are off the grid too. And sometimes our solar cannot do all the work it needs to for drying. And until there's more money in the industry or more incentive, we're going to need to be able to run our generator a little bit. And we do a mindful run of that. And lastly, the square footage tax. Let's incentivize not so much to have to go out and build infrastructure for solar panels, but if you are sun-grown, nothing over your plants, just full roots in the ground, leaves in the air, let's drop that to a 50 cents. That is a direct, easy fix to incentivize sun-grown, and essentially it's solar powered. So let's bring more incentive to that, and that will probably quiet more generators. And lastly, to Melanie's comment, one thing we do in our farm is we leave eco islands, I call them. We leave patches of manzanita, huckleberry, waxleaf ceanothus, all these plants that are really beneficial to our native species. Thank you for the time, and let's open this up on a bigger platform so we all can really shape what our cannabis community and our planning commission can come together and really put forth a good industry moving forward. Thank you.
Public 7108.
Hi, this is Bonnie Blackberry, and thank you very much for having this much needed discussion. I am totally in support of informed decision making, and I feel like there has been a lot of changes in the last few years, and climate change and the drought is a big deal. I really support the need for mapping so that the commissioners and the public can see where all this is and be able to evaluate things a lot better. And I would hope that besides just having, whether it's pre-existing or proposed, have the size and the water source, have more information so you can get an idea. And I'm thinking perhaps the planning department's working on maps about the wells for all throughout the county, whether they're domestic or agricultural. One of the big impacts is the traffic in the roads. I live off of a graveled county road, which the increased traffic on it the maintenance hasn't kept up. So it's like there's just a bunch of roads that are just pretty trashed out. And I would support the county doing some traffic studies on these roads to see what the actual traffic is. I think the more information that everybody has, the more informed decisions they can. And I'm concerned about sustainability and the impacts on the environment. And with the water use and how big it is here compared to somewhere else, I think we need the specific information about that. And also, I feel like when there's been a bunch of neighbors that I've heard at planning commission or zoning administrator meetings having a bunch of concerns, it's like that was not as important as there's the ordinance and this is what it says, and since you did it, you go ahead and do it. And the noise thing, I thought ambience was like the natural ambient sound without all the.
Your time up, Bonnie, so wrap it
Okay,
up.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Leslie Doyle, please.
Good evening, Commissioner. Thank you for taking my call tonight. I just wanted to make a few points. I think that 1.0 pre-existing projects should be considered a priority in permitting, considering that they've been in the queue for 5 to 6 years. They have been considered under the initial CEQA study that showed that we had over 12,000 grows in the area. Also, I would like to make the point that new wells are not being approved without the planning approval, and they have to be considered under CEQA. DEH will not permit a well without that requirement. Also, as a part of our conditions of approval, we are already required by the planning department to do drawdown or performance tests on our existing wells annually. All projects should forbear and have proper water storage. That includes projects that have already been approved. I think that that should be a consideration when we're talking about water use on not only new, but mostly on existing grows. We are seeing more annual inspections than we ever have. This year, we're having the state come out for CDTFA. We're also having metric audits. Humboldt County Planning Department has their own post-approval inspection team now, and also the Ag Department. Traffic count has decreased, in my opinion, and I would ask the commission to request traffic counts be done on all roads, including gravel roads in remote areas such as Island Mountain. If you're out there a lot, you will notice that between 2014 and present, there's definitely a decrease in traffic. Also, the ambient noise under Ordinance 2.0, we're required to do 24-hour noise studies to get the ambient noise levels. And with that, we have a baseline to base our decisions off of when we're increasing fan use or implementing other factors into our grows. Also, I would like to see the mapping done. Humboldt County receives a lot of rain, and I understand forbearance is crucial, especially during drought years. But I would ask the Planning Commission to request that mapping be drawn out of all watersheds and also in areas that all projects have been approved. That's all I have to say tonight. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you. Next caller is Tisha Machete. Okay. You there, Tisha?
Good evening to the commission. Thank you for doing this tonight. I'm glad I was here. I was not prepared for this topic, but it's definitely an overdue conversation. We've been at this permit process now going on 6 years, and this is obviously a multi-pronged issue. There's economic factors, there's environmental factors, there's social factors. Then there's all the people who have been riding this out now for going on 6 years, waiting for final approval. Meanwhile, we've seen all these 2.0 applications blast past them. And I've personally experienced this with some of my 2.0 applications. So I guess kind of how I'm feeling at this point is I definitely think it's a discussion that needs to be had with the public. I would like to see us take some more time to consider all of the factors, especially considering what has happened with COVID, you know, how the community has been impacted with the markets and legalization. We kind of trudged forward on this, hoping that this was going to be our golden goose. And, you know, here we are, we're competing with larger areas that have easily 45-acre grows on one property. So these are definitely some factors that need to be taken into consideration and needs to be a part of the conversation. If any modifications, moratoriums, you know, new applications as opposed to, you know, no new applications, no new permits. And I really hope that we can take the time that is needed to do that in cooperation with the Economic Development Department with the county, because this is really kind of a make or break it. And a lot of people are feeling that pressure now. So I do think it's important that we do our best to try to get it right. We do need data. I agree with a lot of the statements that are coming out from other speakers. So I look forward to us taking that time to pull that information together and gather the feedback from the necessary agencies and parties that also can weigh in on how maybe we can use this as an opportunity to benefit the county going forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next caller. I haven't seen more hands up, but there is another number. Margro Advisors.
All right, thank you, commissioners. Couple of points. One, I'd like to suggest that Director Ford show the commission the GIS restricted watershed area. There are no new permits allowed in any of those areas. We've had several folks in the last couple of years come to us interested in buying properties or considering buying properties, whether they had prior grow or not in those areas. The first thing we do is check the GIS and see if it's in those impacted watershed. If it is, we tell them it's a no-go. So there is a moratorium already in certain areas of the county, so please be aware of that. The other point I want to make is if there is interest in having Fish and Wildlife come and present, we also recommend that you have UC Berkeley and the UC folks come and present on their reporting on cannabis impacts to water and watersheds. They've spent several years doing that research. It's very informative and would provide some additional third-party research information to the commission. Lastly, I believe that it's really critical that we look for cooperative solutions first. Incentives, especially tax credits and grant funding, can result in much higher participation for sustainable farming. You know, when these efforts are pulled together, they're really required to provide easier access to things like solar equipment, more affordable water storage, rain catchment systems, and other facilities that can improve the situation on these farms rather than adding additional restrictions. So we would like to request that the commission consider supporting these types of cooperative efforts first and encourage building this relationship between the county and the industry to further improving the environmental situation. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next caller, Mallory Cunningham.
Hi, I just want to thank you, Alan, for bringing this topic up on the agenda. I think it's really important that we have this discussion, and I do also encourage everybody to have this conversation at a later date that's also more publicly attended. Also, I think this is a great conversation to have countywide, and I think that there would be a lot more participation at a later date also. So thank you. And I have to disagree with the incentivizing the grows that are already existing. I think there's no reason to give handouts even further. I think they've been, given plenty. so far. And I would like to suggest that there are more site-specific EIRs that happen for every grow that's applied for. And I think it's important that we look at each individual project on an individual basis and not county-wide basis. I think each area in Humboldt County is very different. That needs to be taken into consideration in addition to the county or the community opinion of what's going into each neighborhood. I think that's very important also, along with natural resources that are obviously limited, such as water. And I think that we need to hold these businesses to the same standards as the businesses that operate in town. For example, portable toilets are not acceptable as sustainable solutions for permanent employee use. That should not be allowed at all. That's a natural hazard to neighbors as well as the environment. And I also believe that it should be proven that any well used is not hydrologically connected at all, and that should be a requirement that they need to prove that it's not. And yeah, that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there Shane Finley? Go ahead, Shane, if you're there.
For allowing me to speak. I would like to say that the general EIR that has been approved for the entire county, I think that is bogus. Like Mallory was saying, the entire county has very different regions. I'd also like to say that interim permits should definitely be a priority. Director Ford has said in a previous meeting that they are unregulated, and we're pretty much told that the planning department would get back to them to finalize their permit at a later date. And in the meantime, new permits are being passed through in record time. I feel that a lot of the county may have lived in a blind ignorance before. A lot of the grows were tucked away and hidden, out of sight, out of mind. And communities weren't having to face the grows coming up in their neighborhoods, outside their windows, right next door. I think a lot of things have changed in that aspect. Some people have stated that traffic is decreasing on remote roads. However, I feel that's because these commercial grows that are being permitted and are legal are now moving into communities where traffic is now increasing, where it used to be calm and quiet. I think the community's opinion and voice needs to be heard more. I've heard of a lot of grows going in where there is a lot of backlash from the community, and the planning department continues to approve these with the backlash. As far as spot inspections, I feel that if you are doing everything right, you have nothing to fear. OSHA does not give you notice when they show up to a job site or to your business to inspect for safety hazards. I feel that the environmental inspections weigh the same as a safety hazard. So if you're concerned and scared of a spot inspection for your grow, I think you should just step up your game and make sure you're doing everything by the book the way it should be done. Back to the grows and communities, I think it's degrading the quality of life that people have.
You have to wrap it up, Shane.
I think people have worked their life away for moving into these lovely rural neighborhoods, and these grows are just getting forced into their neighborhoods right next door. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public that wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment this time and bring it back to the commission. I'm just wondering if the director has any thoughts. We listened to a lot there. We all did, but anything you'd like to?
Things we do look at things cumulatively, as Kelly Flores mentioned. You know, we do restrict new permits in impacted watersheds. Part of what the board did and the Planning Commission's recommendation was, in adopting the CCLU, is to set caps by watershed, set caps by acreage within the watershed, and within impacted watersheds, new cultivation cannot be approved. And so that is being actively enforced. We are absolutely working on developing a baseline understanding of wells. We've got as was mentioned, we've got a multi-tier approach to look at that we're initiating the work on that. The first phase of that's due back in 3 weeks. And so we should have some interim well regulations coming out of that very soon. We will have a good understanding of where all the wells are in our GIS system by the end of the calendar year. Coming out of that, we will be working to develop probably a watershed-based approach to well permitting. Things don't happen fast, they don't happen immediately, but those are things that are currently being addressed. It's interesting, the desire to see a map. That is something that we have been hesitant to do. And this goes back to 2017 when the Lost Coast Outpost did a Public Records Act request and got all the addresses and APNs of all the cannabis applicants. And that sent fear through a lot of people because now suddenly everything was public record. And the concern always has been that that would make people vulnerable to criminal activity. In fact, one of the things that we saw was that down in the Honeydew area, the paved aprons that are required for new cultivation kind of became a signpost. There is cannabis up this road. And so there was a crime spree for a while where cannabis farms were getting robbed. So we've been very resistant to putting information out there in the public realm, which could be used as a treasure map. And I understand the desire to see good graphics. We use those graphics ourselves. We do look at that, we evaluate that. And, you know, the balance between kind of protecting public safety and providing public information is delicate in this particular case. And we try to respect the need of the people who have come forward, filed applications, particularly existing growers, to not put their information out there on blast for anybody to have. Those were probably the biggest topics I wanted to address. We're obviously willing to do whatever the commission would like in terms of writing a letter or providing correspondence to the board. I will say that that something else I wanted to address is that comment was made, I think, by Commissioner Newman about, you know, enforcement. And I would like to say that we have abated as many sites as we have permitted. So when people talk about there being less traffic, when people talk about there being more water in the streams, which is some of the feedback I do get, and other than during this drought period right now, this is a bit of an anomaly. You know, it's because there has been an active and aggressive abatement program. And frankly, one of the things that we've been a little bit careful about is not just continuing. For a while, we were doing 20 to 30 or more a week. But there are not the big egregious growths that are really left out there as much. And so we've been trying not to get into the backyards of people, of moms and pops. We've really made an intentional effort not to go after small stuff. If it's in a streamside management area, if it's an impacted watershed, if it's got certain criteria associated with it that it's doing environmental damage, or if there's a concentration of them, we look at that. But otherwise, we have slowed down relative to things that are much smaller. I think it's important that there's an understanding that a lot of the things that have been brought up, noise, setbacks, power usage, water usage, those things all are addressed in the existing environmental documents. So what we're really seeing is the fact that I don't think anybody really recognized that we're going to see thousands of permits get approved. And so the backlash here is that there is a high number of permits being approved. And it's not that the environmental documents are inadequate or the work that's been done is inadequate. And there also needs to be, there's this public perception that people who grow cannabis, or there's an underlying tone here that they're somehow not to be trusted. And I would just like to point out some of the most honorable people I have worked with are cannabis applicants. Some of the most honest people I've worked with are cannabis applicants. Some of the most dishonest people I've worked with are people who are in respectable development professions. And so I think there needs to be an elimination of this kind of skepticism about people who are coming into the legal market and getting permitted, that they're somehow, just trying to do things wrong and to fool us. Many people are really truly trying to do the right thing. There are those who are not, but I just want to caution us about stereotyping.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thomas, you had your hand up first.
So as far as the watershed thing, is it possible to, and this might already be out there in maps of watersheds, just to highlight a watershed and say X amount of square feet, or break it down into acres across so many projects? Would that be, like a meet in the middle as far as the mapping aspect?
I'm not sure I understand the question. It's immediately possible right now to pull up the GIS and show you the boundaries of a watershed and to show the permits that are within the watershed.
Oh, okay. So then I think that might be out there. So maybe for perception, that might help some people. It was just an idea that came to mind, but you're probably, yeah.
No, we've got that already hooked up. In fact, we can draw a square around an area and immediately identify how many permits are there, what the acreage is.
Okay. Does that include outstanding permits?
Excuse me?
Does that include permits that have not been processed yet?
Yeah, it includes approved permits. It includes permits that are in the application process.
It'd be great to have that.
Thomas, were you done? Okay, Melanie, your hand is up. Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would love to have a copy of that map. And, you know, on that note, one of the reasons I asked is because I wasn't there when the original CEQA documents were completed, but it would have been nice to have, you know, examination of smaller areas rather than just the whole county, as I mentioned, because, you know, there are areas that are quite different in terms of some of the environmental effects. And then as regards to the CEQA again, you know, understanding that we are not adopting the findings, I, you know, phrase it that way because we're often maybe erroneously asked to do so in some of the staff reports, but on the occasions that we are asked to certify the CEQA document, my question for you, Director, is before I was on the commission, were there ever any cases where instead of certification, the commission asked to return the CEQA document for modifications or voted for rejection?
So I'm going to answer several different questions, comments within that. You're only asked to certify a CEQA document when there's a new CEQA document that's been prepared on a project-specific basis. The project that was just considered tonight had a new and separate CEQA document for it. One of the findings that was admittedly a little bit confusing was to consider the mitigated negative declaration, which is normally language that is reserved for consider the addendum and the previously adopted environmental document. So that was a little bit confusing, but the recommendation to adopt was to adopt a CEQA document prepared specifically for that project. And then I cannot think of a CEQA document that's been brought forward to the Planning Commission that's been rejected.
Or returned for modifications.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess for the mapping, you're saying that that could be available to us, so thank you.
All right, anybody else? I got some thoughts. Sure glad I asked these questions or brought this up, and Melanie has to have this stuff brought up tonight because I learned something. I've never heard anything to the effect that we couldn't see maps, and we've asked for them multiple times, and I've never heard that we couldn't see maps because we were concerned about the security of cannabis grows. It's quite troubling to me that we've asked for that and never got that until tonight. It's troubling that we haven't got the maps, but that's the reasoning we haven't got the maps. And we never even heard that, you know, to the side after a meeting or anything, or why there was a reason or a confidential memo from county council or anything. So that's a little bit disheartening for me. I don't know how much the rest of the commissioners feel, but I'm not trying to take a shot at you, Director, because I have a lot of respect for you. Go ahead.
Response to that is that, you know, I do recall Commissioner McElmore asking for that. But we do not respond to one commissioner's request. Normally, if a commissioner asks for something and then other commissioners say, yes, we want to see that, we absolutely respond to that. We don't respond to minority. Otherwise, we would be running after every commissioner's comment, and we can't do that.
That's very fair, and I respect that. And I know that it's been discussed at meetings. I can remember several meetings that it's been asked for. I know one was for the watersheds, and we talked about cumulative effect maps as well. And
I've brought it up several times and had other commissioners also agree that it would be good to have them.
It isn't going to do any good for us to debate what's brought up, but could we please get those maps so that we can see. It doesn't have
So
to.
we will provide maps showing the surrounding area. Okay, the map of Humboldt County is huge. It's not an easy thing. In fact, if you come into the office to see the map, it is printed out. It is 7.5 feet tall, 4 feet wide.
Well, it sounded like one of the callers had done a lot of the work, so maybe we should talk to her and get some of the maps that she has. I forget which one it was.
Natalie Delap.
That wasn't Madeline.
Oh, and the other caller, yes.
Yeah,
it was Patricia Lai.
Yeah, you're right. So I mean, the maps are out there, and I think that would be very helpful for us going forward. I think it would. I know it would for me, and so.
I'm wondering if we could go in and see the very large wall version as well, maybe with the director at some point.
Yes, go ahead.
This is the area around Garberville.
And I mean, personally, this is just me speaking, but to have that map when I'm looking at a project that's in the area around Garberville, that would be incredibly helpful for me.
Yes.
But I do understand about the privacy and theft issue being in insurance and that having that out there in the public realm. I've seen and heard about that before. And that was a good reminder by the director. When it was brought forth, I remember in Lost Coast Outpost about that coming out in the public realm and thinking, yeah, I can see where they're coming from there because that's not a good thing. Making that out there as public, it needed to be more privatized, as director had mentioned. And kept it that way. So if that is something down the road here, it really needs to be kept under wraps and not made public because there are bad people out there that will use those things for bad things.
I'm sorry, Mike, but are we going to go out and not develop subdivisions or not give addresses, because that could lead to a thief seeing that there's new addresses to go out that he hasn't hit. I mean, where does it stop?
Right.
I mean, we couldn't have the discussion in the
we could sign a non-disclosure agreement.
That's fine. I mean,
it's just been made public. It doesn't matter anymore.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that's what's stretching. We can't even have the discussion of law enforcement in the cannabis ordinance. So we're trying to, I don't know, protect these grows. It doesn't make any sense. How do we make good choices?
Well, we will provide the information. We will provide a cumulative analysis for every cannabis application.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm not sure who was next. Melanie, you have your hand up, but I think it might still be up before. And Thomas.
Yes, I just wanted to add that I would be willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement in order to have access to the maps.
Thank you. Thomas, you have some comment.
So for me, as someone that has couple of addresses on that map, it'd be nice if the county respected the same address disclosure and APN disclosure redactment that the state now does after the state website was used as target grounds for ripping off large amounts of cannabis. I know myself as having children that, lay under a permitted residence. It'd be nice not to have that address disclosed or APN number disclosed, just like many of the other legacy cultivators. And just to give you guys perspective, I wasn't going to share this, but I'm missing out on family and that on vacation to be sitting here with you to explain this to you. My son was just here playing football catch with me, yelling at me. So just, I want you to understand that there's people that care about this. That's it.
Thanks, Thomas. I appreciate that. Noah, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I honestly am sympathetic to the protection of addresses, but what I think we could do, I mean, what I think could accomplish the goal of wanting this map is to see segments, sub watersheds, ridges, natural areas of the landscape, roads, road corridors, and just see the cumulative numbers for those segments. I mean, I think there's ways that you could put maps together that would not disclose the individual addresses, but would say, 19 permits along this road, 7 along this road, 340 in this watershed, things like that. So I know it's all new work that we're asking for, but I just wanted to share that idea about how it could be approached. Thanks.
Thank you, Noah. And I'll agree with Noah that I think that it could be done in that manner too. I don't think we have to go specific, just an aerial map like you showed us, showing that the red parcels are, if somebody wants to find out about a parcel bad enough, they're going to do it. Okay. All you have to do is go on Google Earth. It's not rocket science. And if I can do it, anybody can. Okay. So anyhow, where do we go from here, I guess, is the question. These thoughts have been building up in my head. And then, like I said, Melanie brought it up to agendize it. So I did, and I've kind of thrown it out there. And I think that the public feel, they'd like to have a little more time on it. I think that you've heard what we have to say, Director, and maybe you could come back to us with an agendized item to discuss it some more. And then, or we can come up with some points to bring to send to the supervisors. I just think that we're, being 6 years into this, it's time to say, we threw a lot of, at the wall, and some of it worked and some of it hasn't. And maybe make some adjustments or suggest some adjustments at least.
Okay. So if you're asking me to come back with some discussion points, that's something we can do. I struggle with some of there is a segment of the community that it's, I think, becoming increasingly clear that kind of has cannabis fatigue, that just doesn't want to see cannabis anymore. And that's an issue unto its own. There may be some things the commission is concerned about that you feel aren't adequately addressed in the ordinance. I know there was some confusion tonight about what ambient is, but I thought that in the application that we heard, having the applicant stop all activity on the site and take noise measurements as ambient was as honest as you could get. I mean, that's ambient.
I agree with that.
So, noise isn't necessarily unheard. Noise impacts are something that is significant. The ordinance says more than a 3 decibel increase. And so if that's not adequate and we need to recapture that, then be happy to look at something there. Traffic on roads, that's if the commission's desire is to do additional studies to undertake something like that, that's something that a recommendation to the board can be made. That would require some, taking some traffic counts. the water usage is something that we are working on. And if the commission's not comfortable with the speed at which that is going, then that's something that the commission may want to make a recommendation to the board on. Be happy to try to capture any of that in discussion items.
Mm-hmm. Could I add, yeah, through the chair. If you were taking note of some of the specificities, which I think you were, one of them would be the forbearance. So not having maybe one forbearance period that applies to every single area in Humboldt or every single watershed. Maybe taking a look at where forbearance could be longer, or maybe some places might even be shorter, but it's probably not going to be the same everywhere. And then one of the callers mentioned the dark night incentive, and that would be something that could be looked at, again, in terms of incentives.
Sorry.
The dark night. So
the dark sky.
Yes. And then finally, since you do have all of the maps completed, it would be great if there could be something done towards looking to see if we have any kind of north-south corridor. And by that, I mean a continuous area of natural habitat that extends through Humboldt County. This is something that many other places are looking to do. And like I said, if you do have that, it actually makes permitting any kind of development or project easier, because you don't have to worry so much about the impacts necessarily if you do have at least one of these corridors that would allow migration. So.
I'm going to comment on, I think you hit it perfect, John, your comment, cannabis fatigue. I think that's what's going on, if you want the truth of the matter. I haven't heard that term, and I like it, because I think that is exactly what's going on. We're doing the same thing that we've been doing for about 6 years now, and we run up against the same problems in each project almost on an every 2-week basis. And it starts getting fatiguing, talking about the same issues over and over and over and over. And that's what I'm seeing, and I see it starting to manifest out there in the community, because nobody was really talking too much about cannabis for the longest time. They were just wanting to see where it was going. But now the communities are starting to get impacted, and they're starting to say, how much of this crap is enough? Or why is it all getting done here? Or why, and I think they're valid points. And I'm not against, I don't like cannabis. I've said that from the beginning. I've never made a statement that was otherwise, okay? But I'm not against cannabis, all right? But I'm not willing to say that it should take precedent over all the other things that are out there and all the rights that people have out there. And I think it's time to relook at it. I think that one of the issues that never gets looked at is the law enforcement issue of it. It's why I voted no against the ordinance originally. I was the only commissioner that did vote no. And it was because they would not have that discussion. And I think it's the elephant, it was the elephant in the room then. And I think it's the elephant in the room now. We talk about going out and abating these grows that are out there. I think that has to be a bigger part of it. So I think that's another item that needs to be part of the discussion. All I'm saying is, I think it's time to put a pause on things and look at what the issues are. I think fatigue is setting in.
So I respect you, Alan, and your Commissioner Bongio. I just got to respond to enforcement needing to be a bigger part of it. Perhaps you haven't seen the flyers down in southern Humboldt County saying abate the enforcement unit, or abate the abatement.
We're not Orange County.
No, southern Humboldt. No, I said
there's
southern
actually a whole Facebook page about it.
Yeah, we are at, that's cannabis fatigue.
I think that we're talking about law enforcement is a little bit different than what you're talking about. I'm not talking about an inspector going out and looking at a sign. I'm talking about guys with the enforcement to arrest people.
Problem is, it's not a criminal activity.
When they level the top of the hillside or do things like that, it is. Okay. We can have this discussion another time. Anyhow, we're getting off on tangents, and this was a time to just have some discussion. I think it was suggested that something be brought back to us for further discussion on this, but if you want us to come up, I mean, I could give you a list of the things that were brought up tonight, and we could compose a letter to the supervisors that we'd like to have a look at these issues. My guess is nothing will change, but something might change on some of it. And you might see what I'm seeing. Their phone might be ringing a lot too. Don't know. No problem.
Well, it sounds like the director will bring back some discussion points in a month on what we've just asked him to
I'll do that.
Look into.
It's not like you don't have any other things on the
Yeah, sorry.
It's what it was to start the discussion on it, and I think that I actually felt it was a pretty good discussion tonight. I like the public comment. I like what the commissioners had to say. I think it had to be started at some point. So I don't think we'd be doing the county justice if we didn't evaluate the ordinance, evaluate ourselves, evaluate how we've been making decisions on it. I think that if we made some tweaks, it would make our decision-making process much easier. And I think the ideas that Melanie brought up were excellent. If we can come up with something that's, there's so many gray areas that if we could have more defined parameters, maybe that would be, make it easier. I don't know. I mean, I get resentful, and I'm sure this has come out, but it feels like we've made it much easier for the cannabis community to do their projects than we have for the, I'm going to call it the real world projects. And that I am resentful of that. I just think it should be equal across the board. And that's something that I would like to try to get more towards. So.
Chair Bongio, can we take a 5-minute break and then we can return to item 1 here for the Humboldt County Public Works?
That would be fine with me if everybody is good with that. All right. Director Newman like a 5-minute break, so let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and start the next segment. You ready to go? All right, welcome back, everyone. So now we'll move on to the first item in our tonight's public hearings, and it is the Humboldt County Department of Public Works Coastal Development Permit in the Manila area. Let's go to staff report.
Hi, good evening, commissioners. I'm going to share my screen now.
Welcome.
All right, good evening, commissioners. My name is Megan Acevedo, and I will be presenting the Humboldt County Department of Public Works Bike Path Project for planner Trevor Eslow, who was unable to be here tonight. Public Works is applying for a coastal development permit within the Caltrans Road right-of-way in the Manila area. Here is an image of the project location in Manila off of State Route 255. The project area extends from the Pacific Avenue.
Megan.
Hi.
Megan,
Yes?
we're not seeing a shared screen.
Oh, you're not?
No.
Okay, sorry about that.
We see you.
Okay. Okay, here we go. Try this again.
There the start is.
All right, there you go.
There, yep.
Okay, so I was at this slide. So here's an image of the project location in Manila off of State Route 255. The project area extends from the Pacific Avenue and Peninsula Drive intersection to the Carlson Drive intersection and will occur on the western side of State Route 255. The project would improve safety for non-motorized and motorized traffic in Manila, will enhance coastal access, heighten driver awareness of the community, and will fill in the gap for non-motorized travel between the Pacific Avenue and Lupin Avenue neighborhoods. The project will also include a 150-foot long concrete sidewalk, 2 light posts, crosswalks at Lupin Drive and Carlson Drive, 3 interpretive signs to create coastal dunes awareness, a speed hump and signage in front of the Manila Community Center and Redwood Montessori School, and wetland creation. The project will impact approximately 0.77 acres of wetlands on site, but will create 0.92 acres of new wetlands on site, seen in the lower diagram, and will deduct 3.1 acres from the existing mitigation bank of wetlands off-site at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Fay Slow Wildlife Area. This will bring the total wetland mitigation ratio to 5.2 to 1. The Humboldt County Planning Department recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the Humboldt County Department of Public Works Coastal Development Project Mitigated Negative Declaration and the Mitigation Monitoring and Reporting Program. Conditionally approve the Humboldt County Department of Public Works Coastal Development Permit and adopt the resolution and make all required findings for approval of the Coastal Development Permit. This concludes my presentation, and myself and staff are available for questions.
Thank you. Is there any
Thank you, Ms. Acevedo. That was a great presentation. I do just want to add one thing. The commission may be experiencing a bit of deja vu with this, as you have seen this application before. You actually approved basically the same project back in 2020. Public Works withdrew that approval and pursued the preparation of an environmental document, and this environmental document does include enhanced mitigation. So it is basically the same project with enhanced mitigation. So I just wanted to clarify why you're seeing something before that you may remember.
Can you remind us, for the coastal zone, it's not just a, if you're using wetland area, it's not just a 1-for-1 or a certain ratio to a certain ratio. You have to have certain specific reasons why you're impacting the ESHA. And can you clarify how this meets that requirement?
Yeah, so it has a lot to do with the nature of the use. And since this is a use that provides access and it is an allowed use, it is a use that can be considered for approval, even though it does impact wetlands, and provided that adequate wetland mitigation is provided.
This would fall under the incidental public purpose set the one?
I'm not as familiar with that as I am just with the where there are allowed uses, and this would be a public access use. It would be a public use, and so those are uses allowed, subject to a coastal development permit.
Because they've turned down highways that, you know, would like put one single column in what would be ESHA and would alleviate thousands of hours of traffic, and said that that doesn't count. So I was just, they're so strict. I was just wanting to make sure that we are confident in that the specifically enumerated reasons for allowing wetland fill.
We're pretty confident with this.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Newman, you had your hand up, and then see Hank Seaman with his hand up.
Yes, thanks, Chair Bongio. I wanted to ask staff about the email and comments from public member Jackson Hand. We received correspondence from him. He says in his letter that the 2020 proposal was not passed. So I want to get a little bit more information on that. And then the other concern is the 5 points that he brought out about removal of the trees and the sound barrier for those neighbors right along, what is it, Block Street. A fence may be erected if needed, but I don't see anything here in this new one, et cetera, et cetera. So concerns that are brought forth by this citizen here, I'd like to hear addressed.
So I do just want to affirm that this absolutely was approved by the commission. I believe it was on May 5th of 2020. Maybe it was the 19th, I'm sorry. But it was one of those days. It was then withdrawn on May 20th. So within the appeal period of the commission's approval, the Public Works Department indicated that they wanted to pursue an environmental document and withdrew the approval. And then they came back in and resubmitted. And I do apologize. I'm having trouble hearing you, Commissioner Newman. So it sounded like a letter or an email from Mr. Jackson.
Yes, Jackson Hand, the email that we received, the correspondence, his email is dated October 6th, yesterday, and October 5th. And then his email, September 19th, 2021. It's all in one document.
So he starts with the in the second paragraph identifying that it explicitly states the project will benefit Friends of the Dunes, has been removed, and previously the bike trail I believe did extend onto the Friends of the Dunes property. It looks to me like now it stops at the boundary of Friends of the Dunes. So that is how that has been addressed. In terms of impacts to property values and quality of life, normally multi-use path is considered a benefit to the community. I don't know how that plays.
I think I was more concerned about the sound buffer, the trees are being cut down and some new ones are being proposed to go in there. Nothing temporary like a fence or anything else for those residents right there. that are undergoing this change.
Through the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would like to address this issue. So I'm Hank Seaman, Public Works Deputy Director. If I may, could I give some comments and then address the commissioner's comments?
Sure, they're 40-foot tall willows is what he's referring to that are being cut down.
Yeah. So this has been a long project. It was a partnership that started with the county, Caltrans, Manila Community Service District, trying to establish the first separated shared use path in Caltrans right away in the county. And we really, the fundamental essence of the project is to connect the community, the neighborhood at Lupin with the southern portion of Peninsula Drive where the community center and the school are. Then the project was expanded to consider going from Lupin up to Carlson. So there's basically two segments of this project. And that northern extension was envisioned to have the benefit of potentially connecting to Friends of the Dunes Coastal Nature Center. But Friends of the Dunes decided maybe 2 years ago that they weren't ready to try to advance a connection to this project. So things have changed over the last few years. And these two segments, so there's the southern segment from Pacific to Lupin, and then the northern segment, Lupin to Carlson. It's that northern segment that has more mature willows that separate the highway from several residents on Locke Street. And that provides a sound barrier for them. That northern segment also has a drainage ditch and has some drainage issues. Our project would not exacerbate those, but there is an upcoming project that the Community Services District just received funding to do drainage enhancement in Manila. And so that will be a future benefit to address some of the drainage issues on that northern segment. But what has come together now for Public Works is that we think it would be prudent to consider reducing this project to only the southern segment. And that would be responsive to the concerns of the landowners along Locke Street. So if we retain that southern segment from Pacific to Lupin, we retain the essential purpose of this project, which was to connect the Lupin neighborhood with Peninsula Drive. Really, we want trails to connect communities and not divide communities. And with concerns of landowners along Locke Street and then also at Carlson, we think it would be prudent at this point to consider modifying the project so that it extends from Pacific to Lupin. So I want to bring that forward as a way to address some of these valid concerns that the landowners have along Locke Street. Thank you.
Melanie, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I also had a question. Thank you, Commissioner Newman, for bringing that up. It was also an area of concern for me. So in regards to the noise, did you look at any other mitigations for the people living there in regards to, for example, window additions or replacement windows, or there's inserts now that are very common worldwide for noise mitigations generally? And am I understanding you correctly that with this new change, the willows will remain?
If the commission would create a condition that the project is modified to extend from Pacific to Lupin, then we would not do the segment from Lupin to Carlson, and those willows adjacent to the Locke Street homes would remain. They would not be affected by the project.
I see. Okay. And then how would you recommend we condition that in terms of language, should we decide to go that route?
I could foresee two conditions. One condition would be just to say that the project is modified to begin at the Pacific Avenue intersection and terminate at the Loop and Drive intersection. And then the second condition would be to essentially adjust the wetland mitigation approach so that wetland impacts from the modified project shall be mitigated on site at a ratio of 1.2 to 1 and off site at a ratio of 4 to 1 through Humboldt County's mitigation credits at the Face Slough Wildlife Area. So by modifying the project, we'll have less wetland impacts. There's more sensitive impacts in the northern segment, so we'll be able to reduce our environmental impacts. And that second condition would just allow the wetland mitigation to be proportional to the impacts at the same ratios that are in the CEQA document currently.
Okay, thank you. And then just out of curiosity, were there any investigations into some of the standard noise mitigations in terms of window alterations or?
For this project, we did not explore that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff before we open this up to public comment? Mike, are you? Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't get unmuted. I apologize. Any other questions before I open this up to public comment? Seeing none, I will see if we have any public that wishes to comment. Would anybody like to comment on this project? Eileen, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello.
Hello.
Hi. My name is Eileen Mandelbaum. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission. My husband and I support the objectives of the project, but we have a specific concern regarding the location and design of the two streetlight standards proposed on Pacific Avenue. We have property on the corner of Pacific and Peninsula, and we definitely support having a light at the intersection of the highway 255 and the corner of Pacific, because that is a very difficult intersection to see at night, especially in the fog and the rain. We want to know, is that where one of the street lights will be? And also, where will the second light be located? We want to make sure that that light does not cause glare into our dwellings, so that the height and design is very important. The light should be shielded and at a height that prevents glare. There is already a street light at the end of Pacific Avenue, which is very high and very bright, and it issues a very blinding glare that even though we're a block away, goes directly into our west-facing windows. And of course that interferes with the hope of viewing dark night skies anywhere in that area. So if these concerns could be addressed as part of your mitigations that you approved, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. The caller is Public 1676.
So my name is Nancy Ihara, and I'm a Manila resident. I support the staff recommendations regarding the construction of Class 1 bike path. The project has been in the works for many years and is the result of community efforts to improve bike and pedestrian safety along 255. And as noted in the staff report, it is also to heighten driver awareness of the community, because we're always hoping people will drive slower. Quite frankly, it is my hope that not only that this project be improved, but that in the future the trail will be expanded both to the north and the south along 255, and just as importantly, inspire the construction of trails along other major thoroughfares to accommodate non-motorized vehicles. For me, it is important that we transition as much as possible away from cars to safe, non-motorized means of transportation. I did want to make a comment about the noise because, I mean, perhaps I'm wrong, but the noise for me is the noise of people on bikes and walking, which I don't, along that trail, which I don't imagine would be considerable. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller is Rich Tobin.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
I wholeheartedly support the reduction in the trail scope, or else I would have had to appeal if it was approved, because the 90% plans that are in that program would have created the trail through the wetlands, directed all the water that flows from the extensive wetlands on the property near Lock Street into a side channel on the west side of the trail. On the east side of the trail, the plans show contour lines and a depiction of where the water will be. In the word description of it, they said all the rest of the water from the wetlands would go down the west side, all the water. The way it is now, when a good rain, it backs all the way up and increases the flooding to the properties on Lock Street. Increased water in that area would increase the flooding. The increased water would increase the flow, and it would have eroded the mitigated wetlands that they had intended to put in. I'm glad I don't have to do that. I wanted the staff to know that that was in there, and I would like the director to comment on whether when they want to extend the project north or south, will a new CDP application be required where the public will have an opportunity to comment on the extension? Thank you. And I thank the county for looking out for the residents adjacent to the property. Thank you.
Anybody else who wishes to speak on public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment and bring it back to the commission. I got one right at the buzzer. I'm going to let her speak. Colleen Clifford.
Can you hear me? I tried to call in, but I think this might work better. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry to keep it going. I just wanted to show my support for this project. It's been long-term and we've been in support since the beginning. I'm sorry to see it get shortened, and we'd love to see it extend north and south as Nancy suggested, but obviously keeping the concerns of neighbors in mind, of course. We live on Orange Drive right next to the school, and this would be a huge boon to our community. We have 2 kids that would just love to ride their bikes and see their community outside of a car and be safe. 255 is not a safe street for pedestrians or bikes. And we do our part to try to show ourselves visible to the people driving through. And we also think it would be a great boon to the larger community, people coming from out of the area to see the beach, come to mini golf, go to the park. You know, Manila's got some really cool places, beautiful things to see. And we're so happy to be residents here. And we think this would be a really wonderful addition to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, one last chance. Public comment. Anybody wants to speak? All right, public comment is closed and bring it back to the commission. Dendra Mangler, I'm not sure who she is, but she wishes to speak. She an analyst? I don't know. Okay, well, let's bring it back to the commission. So, what are the thoughts of the commission? Any questions?
You got Mike's hand up.
Thanks, Chair. You are very low key right now, by the way. It's hard to hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Just FYI, that's all. That's all. But I like what Hank Seaman was saying about modifying to reduce the plan right now at this point from Pacific to Lupin. And the second condition being the wetlands mitigation being 1 to 2, 1.2 to 1 for on-site and off-site 4 to 1. I would hazard to make that recommendation to pass it with those 2 extra conditions at some point there. So those are my thoughts.
I would second that.
I just put it out there for discussion as to what my thoughts are at this point. So
Noah has his stuff, and then we'll come back around to that. So go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to chime in to say I do remember voting for this project the first time around. I would really like to see it pass. I'm somebody who rides my bike out 255 from time to time, and I totally agree that this is just one segment of it, but it will improve that area for bike use. I would be happy to make a motion once, or are we at that point?
Yeah,
I think I'd be happy to make a motion to, well, hang on a second. I actually don't have the resolution in front of me, so let me just take a moment to pull that up, or maybe somebody else can while I'm getting it.
I've got it right here.
Why don't you make the motion, Mike, and we'll let Noah second it.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion to adopt the mitigated negative declaration, make all the required findings for the approval of the coastal development permit based on the evidence in the staff report and public testimony, and adopt a resolution approving the Humboldt County Department of Public Works project subject to recommended conditions, modifying it to reduce first condition, modifying it to reduce it to from Pacific to Lupin streets, and with the wetlands condition as a second condition, on-site 1.2 to 1 and off-site 4 to 1, as recommended by Hank Seaman.
I would second that very well stated motion. Thank you, Mike.
No, any further discussion on it? Seeing none, I'd ask Laura for a roll call vote, please.
Alan Bongio,
Yes.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Mike Newman,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Laura. So that brings us to item number 2. We have 10 minutes basically left in our time for tonight. Do you think we should start that, Director, or call it?
We can get it.
Looks like a fast one.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's get it through.
Okay, so the West Haven Volunteer Fire Department Coastal Development Permit in the Trinidad area. We'll take a staff report, please. Quick.
Good evening, commissioners. Can you see the screen? I will make it full size.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So what I have is the application from the West Haven Volunteer Fire District for a coastal development permit and a conditional use permit for the construction of a new open concept 375 square foot roofed 1-story pre-engineered metal accessory structure with concrete footings to store emergency vehicles and equipment for the West Haven Volunteer Fire Department. Now, the area in question, the new, this project is just going to be this 15 foot by 6 roof covering for the parcel that has shared uses with the fire hall, the West Haven Ladies Club, and also the West Haven Community Service District office. Now, this is what it would look like from the street view. There is no expansion. There is no current expansion of, or the intensity of the use is not expanding from the established use. They're literally using the same parking space, just covering it to make their equipment last longer. This is a map view of the area. The present plan and zoning designations, it's in the Trinidad area under rural village. The density is allowed are 3 units per acre. The lot size is 0.49 acres and low instability. The zoning, residential single family 20 with the combining districts XMR. Basically, there's no intended expansion other than what's there, so it doesn't really trigger riparian corridor protection. There's no manufactured home being put in, no subdivisions. And this would be a CEQA exempt project under 15303E, accessory appurtenant structures, including garages, carports, patios, swimming pools, and fences. There is no vegetation removal or other development proposed. And based on a review of the Planning Division reference sources and comments from involved referral agencies, planning staff believes that the applicant has submitted evidence in support of making all the required findings for the approval of the coastal development permit and conditional use permit. And that concludes the report, and I will be available for questions.
Any questions? Seeing. Oh, Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, just want to make sure that I'm understanding. Thanks for that report, Logan, that it's the only proposed project is just that covering for the parking area. That's the only development that we're talking about?
That is correct.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'm going to open this up to public comment. We have one, Kendra Dingler. Go ahead. You there, Kendra? There we go.
I wanted to comment on the Manila issue.
Okay, that one's done. So
I know previously.
Thank you.
That's Zoom.
Okay, West Haven Community Services. Go ahead, star 6. There you go.
Yeah, hi. The district staff and board are in total support of this project. However, we have asked throughout the application process as a mitigation to an ongoing parking issue with the CSD customers and the multi-use facility. Many times in normal times when COVID's not happening, we would have a lot of cars if there was an event or other functions at the community use of the ladies club. And there is a dilapidated old shed at this point that was at one point built as cheaply as possible in the 60s to house a contract post office. And so the district has asked for a mitigation of the project to be removal of this decaying building to create parking for the community services district and customers so that the staff and district customers would no longer conflict with the emergency vehicle egress and other uses of the property. And other than that, we're in 100% support of the much needed covering of the apparatus. So, mitigations have been tried, such as signage and education of people, and no amount of signage or education seems to resolve the issue. So we've asked to mitigate it by removing this dilapidated little building to create the parking as part of this project. Thank you.
Anybody else who wishes to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment and bring this back to commission. And Mike Newman has his hand up.
So I just want to comment as to the last commenter that we're not going to be voting on the recommendation here. It is not to demolish that building at this point. This is just to add that shed onto the side of the existing, or not shed, but the carport, I would call it, which is now a fire apparatus port, just to keep it out of weather's way. And then maybe down the road, they could look at it more about the dilapidated postal building to demolish that and make that more into parking. But that, I just want to reiterate, that is not part of this recommendation. Is that correct to staff?
Logan Shine, contract planner to the chair. That is correct.
Thank you. Thomas, I see you have your hand up as well. Thomas?
I was, can we just add the demolishment as a condition of approval of that little small 250-foot structure?
We're on vacation.
Oh, my son's hard. My son's putting me on blast.
So the short answer is that we have not evaluated whether or not it has any historical significance, and it is old enough to be evaluated.
Okay.
All right. So
I've been there.
any other questions? No. Any other questions or anything? Anybody like to make a motion on this one? Noah, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I support this simple project, and I think we should leave the more complicated question of what to do with the old post office for another day. So I would move that we find this project exempt from environmental review pursuant to sections 15303E of the state CEQA guidelines, make all the required findings for approval of the coastal development permit based on evidence in the staff report, and adopt the resolution approving the West Haven Volunteer Fire Department project subject to the recommended conditions.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Laura, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Noah Levy,
Yes.
Brian Mitchell,
Yes.
Mike Newman,
Yes.
Alan Bongio,
Yes.
Peggy O'Neill,
Yes.
Thomas Mulder,
Yes.
Melanie McCaver,
Yes.
Motion carries unanimous. And with that, we've reached the bewitching hour of 9:30, and we will call this meeting of the Planning Commission to an end. So with that, we're not taking motion to adjourn anymore. That's the other place I work at. So, I will call this meeting adjourned, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. And you have some fun in Hawaii, Thomas.
Yeah, Thomas, enjoy. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. Good night, all.